Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are back with another episode of Daily Palantir. On today's show, we've got some things to talk about. Number one, Palantir just got a #1 ranking in AI and ML from Forrester Wave, which is a very important IT software vendor report that a lot of people read before they buy and procure software. So we're going to talk about that, the implications of what that means. Number two, Palantir showed up in a new article today about Ukraine. Haven't talked about Palantir in Ukraine in a while. So we're going to dive through that article and try to understand how Palantir has continued to be used in Ukraine. And then finally, Nvidia earnings. We had Nvidia earnings yesterday. I'm not going to do an entire recap of that for the entire, I think I did about a 25-minute recap this morning in the Morning Open stream. I will leave the link in the description. There is a chapter in that Morning Open where you can click on to get my thoughts on Nvidia. But I do want to talk about some of the implications that Nvidia showed in their earnings because I definitely think it affects software companies in the AI space like Palantir. A lot to get into. Let's get into it. Okay, first up is the Forrester Wave report that we got this morning, where Palantir was named one of the, well, they were named #1 on the entire list. So here we go right here. Palantir ranks #1 by Forrester as an AI ML platform. Quote, is Palantir quietly becoming one of the largest players in the market, seeking a consistent, sustained growth rate in the past half decade by making its platform more accessible to users. And essentially Arnie, shout out to Arnie right here, saying that, hey, seems like Palantir is an AI leader. So this is the actual front page of the report. I don't have the report myself, but this is a report. I talked to a couple people this morning that are in data science. This is a report that people pay a lot of money for. If you're in the data science space or a software procurement space, you know this and Gartner are kind of the platforms that people really care about to understand what type of software they should be buying. So you would imagine a CTO or CIO is getting this report. They're reading through it. They're trying to understand. They're the ones that have to sign off on a multi-million, maybe tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollar deal on a Palantir, a C3 AI, an IBM, an Amazon, a Microsoft, Data Robot, etc. And so before they sign off, they kind of use these third-party platforms to validate, hey, is this like worth buying? Should we actually be getting this software? And do the industry experts, aka Gartner and Forrester Wave, do they believe that we're making the right decision if we end up going with something like Palantir? If you take a look at the list right here, you've got Cloudera, Altair, and Domino Data Lab really at the bottom. And then as you work your way up, you got AWS, Microsoft Data Robot, IBM, C3 AI, Google Databricks. Palantir is at the front of the list as a leader. Now, this makes a lot of sense. In 2022, the same thing happened for Palantir. I believe we were ranked #1 on the AI machine learning platform list from Forrester Wave. At that point, that was a really big deal because the stock was at like $7. And we were above Microsoft, which was like really nice because that was some good news when, you know, the stock wasn't in the best situation. But we're seeing that again. So what does this mean for investors? It's good, right? We're at the top of the list. And so if you've got a company that is on the edge on if they should work with Palantir or a different software provider, and they get this list and they say, you know, they read through the report and they're like, all right, we were already thinking of going with Palantir. We went through a boot camp. I was actually talking with someone today who attended a Palantir boot camp, and it was kind of the same stuff that we heard on the earnings call, which is that the time to value that you're getting in these boot camps is what's making the decision easier for the people that attend the boot camps themselves. And when they show you what they're doing, it becomes really easy to then make a decision on, hey, should we buy the software or not, because we're seeing the value of it. And because we're seeing the value of it, which is exactly what they said on the earnings call, that's why they're closing these deals within 4 weeks or 7 days or at most a month, because you're actually getting transformational value, and then you can get to a decision on what you want to do. If you're still on the edge after that boot camp and the CIO or the CTO or the CEO wants to read some fancy report that gives them the confirmation bias that Palantir is the #1, then you end up having that report say Palantir is the #1 platform, and then boom, you probably get a better chance to get the deal done. So at the end of the day, important, not really going to move the needle in terms of the stock or anything, but for people that are on the edge that are procuring Palantir software, this is one of those things you want them to be able to read, see Palantir at the front of the list, and say, all right, I got it. I'm going with Palantir. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is this new article that came out today on the BBC, and it's about Ukraine. So the title of the article, Ukraine's long-range drones using Western tech to hit Russia. Western tech right there implying Palantir. So if we command F Palantir, this is where the article starts talking about Palantir. It is not only cheap drones making the difference. Palantir, a large U.S. data analysis company, was one of the first Western tech companies to aid Ukraine's war effort. It started by providing software to improve the speed and accuracy of its artillery strikes. Now, it has given Ukraine new tools to plan its long-range drone strikes. So a new update. We all knew that Palantir was helping with the targeting in Ukraine, but we're getting kind of an official update here today. British engineers from Palantir, working with Ukrainian counterparts, have designed a program to generate and map the best ways to reach a target. Palantir makes clear it is not involved in the missions, but has helped train more than 1,000 Ukrainians on how to use its software. The BBC has been shown how it works in principle. Using streams of data, it can map Russia's air defenses, radar, and electronic jammers. The end product looks similar to a topographical chart. I think we've seen kind of demos. I think Palantir did an interview with the BBC a long time ago about how the software is being used as well. Time Magazine also did a piece on this. So we've seen them kind of explain what they're doing in Ukraine, but we're getting a little bit more detail here today. The tighter the contours, the heavier the air defenses. Locations have already been identified by Ukraine using commercial satellite imagery and signals intelligence. Lewis Mosley of Palantir says the program is helping Ukraine to skirt around Russia's electronic warfare and air defense systems to reach their target. He said, understanding and visualizing what that looks like across the entire battle space is really critical to optimizing these missions. The execution of the long-range drone strikes is being co-coordinated by Ukraine's intelligence agencies who work in secrecy, but the BBC has been told by other sources about some of their details. Scores of drones can be fired for any one mission, as many as 60 at one target. And that's pretty much the extent of what they said for Palantir. One last paragraph right here. Palantir software have already mapped out the best routes. Mr. Sarah Martin says flying a lot of drones is key to overwhelming and exhausting Russia's air defenses. So too is making the drones cheaper than the missiles trying to shoot them down or the targets that they are trying to hit. At the end of the day, what this means for investors is that Palantir is still being used in Ukraine and is providing value in Ukraine. What will happen with the Ukraine war? What will happen when we get a presidential administration, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? And what is Russia's strategy going to be to ultimately get this war to end? I think both sides at this point are pretty tired and they want the war to end. I don't know. What I do know and what I can't take away from this as an investor is that Palantir software is important. It's critical. It's obviously being used. And it's one of those pieces of software that if you are a sovereign country trying to protect your sovereignty, you are going to be using Palantir software. And when things get really bad, aka, when you get invaded or where you really feel threatened, when your sort of global legitimacy becomes into check, you pull up the money in your defense budgets and you deploy it against software. This is not a game of just having drones and missiles and helicopters and guns. This is about knowing how to use all of those effectively, which means software. So again, I've been saying this for the past couple years, but I think the NATO business for Palantir is going to be massive. I think Germany, France, all these countries are going to start using Palantir software. I made a video not a long time ago, about 3 weeks ago, maybe about a month and a half ago, about the Bavarian state of Germany now using Palantir. They gave them a 5.4 million euro contract to work in the police department. So little by little, we're seeing different parts of Europe that has been kind of anti-Palantir besides the United Kingdom say, hey, we kind of need their stuff. And it's so ironic because the video I did a couple of days ago talked about the privacy regulations and GDPR regulations that are dominant in Europe. Palantir was preparing their software and their technology before those became the law. So you got the Europeans afraid of Palantir when Palantir actually cares the most about civil liberties and privacy, etc. I think that's only going to increase in the world of geopolitical turmoil that we are currently in, along with defense spending going up. And I think a lot of the money ultimately is going to go to Palantir. Okay, finally, let's talk about Nvidia earnings because I do think there's some implications from Nvidia on Palantir. So again, if you want the full details, I'll leave a link in the description and you can check out my full Nvidia breakdown. But at its core, Nvidia is growing 100% year over year, $30 billion in revenue, guided for $32.5 billion. And they knocked it out of the park. The stock is down, I think, 6-7%. I honestly think the street's just kind of tired and, the stock's up 150% year to date. It's a little bit buyer fatigue. And I kind of like that the stock's not going crazy because that means the market can kind of calmly move forward, broaden out a little bit of the rally and not have the insane obsession that it's been having with Nvidia. I mean, I would love a world in which in the next earnings, Nvidia earnings matter, but they don't hold the fate of the market. That's just kind of annoying every time that it happens. So, the core thing, this is the summary of their actual economic data, was good. I mean, again, gross margins went down a little bit, but that's more so due to the Blackwell delay, not that big of a deal. Revenue up 122%, net income $16.5 billion. I mean, that's just crazy, up 168%. And then you've got diluted earnings per share. That's up 168%. Operating income up 174%. And then again, overall revenue at 30 billion, 26 billion of that being in the data center, which is kind of their core GPU business, up 122%. So what does this mean for Palantir? Well, it means a couple things. Nvidia is a hardware company. Sometimes I think people forget they do have a software business that's growing, but it's a hardware company. They have 70% gross margins on that hardware, which is incredible. And that's a lot of intellectual property and pricing power and basically monopolization that they've had because they, made the GPU what it is today, and they have the proprietary designs and all of that stuff to be able to command that type of a premium. But it is a hardware company. And I think the thing that's very important to understand about Nvidia is none of this hardware matters. Like, literally, none of it matters. None of it. Unless there's a use case. All these companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, spending $20 billion every 90 days to build out their CapEx AI infrastructure to handle all of the workloads in terms of their AI cloud. None of it matters unless there are real use cases for AI. And so I believe as Palantir investors, when you're investing in Palantir, you are investing in the software manifestation of what is going to be the inevitable AI revolution that is coming. And that is probably already here. OpenAI today has announced that they're trying to, well, they haven't announced, but the Wall Street Journal rumor is that they're trying to raise at $100 billion in terms of their newest valuation. Apple is rumored to be investing along with Thrive Capital and Microsoft. OpenAI did confirm that they have 200 million weekly users, active users of ChatGPT, which is double of that last fall. That is just insane to have that many people using the product. Perplexity, another AI startup worth about $1 billion. They've done 250 million queries a month. Now that's insignificant compared to Google doing 8.5 billion searches a day. But the more I've been using ChatGPT and Perplexity, the less I'm using Google. I'm not really bearish Google, but I'm just finding less use cases to actually engage with Google search. YouTube's obviously big, Gmail is big, and Google Cloud is important. But the core search product has been getting less of my attention towards these AI applications. So what I'm trying to say here is that I think AI's software demand is growing. I think hardware from Nvidia, given these guidance numbers, $32.5 billion they're going to do next quarter, which means they're probably going to do $1 billion above that, is showing that the CapEx infrastructure build out is happening. Why does that matter for Palantir? None of that CapEx means anything unless there's a software application and use case. Palantir is deploying LLMs, which are what the point is of buying these GPUs to train these large language models as a new computational form of infrastructure for people's data, and particularly enterprises' data, in order to make those enterprises more productive and efficient. So the bull case for Palantir is that LLMs are useless. They are absolutely useless unless you attach them to what Palantir calls the ontology, which is their Foundry product. And then when you put it on top of AIP, you are allowing the infrastructure to now make sense in the context of an organization, of a BP, of an Airbus, of the hundreds of clients that Palantir has. So if you didn't have GPU demand, if you didn't have the intense training demand for these models, you would not have software demand that Palantir is seeing, and we're seeing it in their numbers with the reacceleration of growth. Meaning, if NVIDIA is not selling GPUs, Palantir is probably not getting that much demand to implement AI, LLMs, AIP, etc., because people aren't using the LLMs in their everyday workflows and use cases in their enterprise jobs because it's just not that useful, it's not that valuable, etc. Now, I can talk a lot about the use cases of AI, all the different ways that Palantir is using it with supply chain and defense and all this stuff, but the point is, if you believe in their numbers and you believe in NVIDIA's guidance numbers, then there is a narrative that's being set up here, and that narrative is that AI does have a use case. It has a lot of use cases in the enterprise, which should unlock trillions of dollars of value, maybe even superseding the hardware use case of, or the hardware sort of TAM of what NVIDIA is projecting out to do. And that once everyone's done building out their infrastructure when it comes to AI and all that CapEx spend maybe in the next 2 years is fully done in Google, Microsoft, they spent a couple $100 billion and now they're good to go. The ROI from that CapEx is going to be where the money and where the investor capital starts to go. That's why I think people are willing to pay $100 billion for OpenAI. I think that's a little bit of a crazy valuation given they're not profitable. They are growing, but Palantir's at 70 billion. They're profitable. Palantir's actually showing you real use cases with LLMs. I do think OpenAI is going to be a very, very strong company, and I think they can do very, very well. But the point is, if that investor demand in the private markets is there for a company worth 100 billion that's not profitable yet, they're seeing something bigger in terms of what the AI use cases will be, which means if OpenAI, which at the end of the day is a consumer product, is going to unlock massive value for AI. I would imagine the enterprise, where all of the real economic GDP value is going to, right? The most important companies on the planet becoming more efficient, productive, etc., which is what grows the top line global economy. I would imagine AI is worth a lot in that sector. So I think Nvidia earnings were really bullish for Palantir because they're showing demand is continuing to grow. Guidance was strong, which means Palantir should be having similar types of demand, not literally like Nvidia, but similar types of demand in terms of the necessity to implement and deploy AI, aka LLMs, into the enterprise. Now, there will be a day where the hardware demand starts to fall off, and I don't think that's actually bearish for Palantir. I think that's actually bullish, because at the end of the day, if Palantir is a software provider of AI into the enterprise, and people are done building out their CapEx, then it's just about deploying software. And so my bull case for Palantir is that even 3 years from now, when everyone's done spending a ton of money on NVIDIA chips, there's still going to be a lot of healthcare companies. There's going to be a lot of defense agencies. There's going to be a lot of space companies. There's going to be a lot of companies that have to implement energy solutions in a more effective way. Like, there's going to be a lot of companies across the world that are going to want to get the benefits. There's going to be plenty of retailers like Kohl's in Australia that Palantir got to deal with that are going to want to become more efficient, more effective, and quite frankly, they have no choice because their competitors are going to do that, and if they don't do that, they're not going to be able to compete. That's where I think the massive use case is for Palantir, and I think this is what Karp means when he says ontology and chips. Chips is one set of AI, ontology is the other part. No one talks about ontology. People talk about LLMs, but ontology is what makes the LLMs valuable. That is the secret that I think people don't know about Palantir, but if they did know that about Palantir, the investment thesis would make more sense, and I think that's good, because if everyone knew it, then the stock would be up even more, right? If you're supposed to invest in something when people don't fully understand the thesis, because that means there's some alpha, there's a discovery of the lack of knowledge that the broader market has that you may understand, which allows you to gain a asymmetric advantage. So I think Karp's entire point, and the reason why Karp is so bullish, the reason that Palantir is showing off all these customers at these AIP cons is like, hey, we have something the rest of these software companies, these SaaS companies don't have. That's why we're getting a premium. That's why the street is liking what we're doing. That's why we're accelerating growth. And that's why AI is actually going to be a real tailwind for Palantir. All right, that's it for me. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Let me know your thoughts on NVIDIA earnings in the context of Palantir. Thank you for everyone who showed up to the live stream yesterday on NVIDIA. That was really humbling. We had about 10,000 people show up live. It's a big deal for the channel. It means the world to me. And thank you guys for tuning in and letting me hopefully provide some information, value, and entertainment in your lives as you continue to enjoy and consume the content. Thank you, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys on the next episode.